Hi everyone, welcome to my channel. My name's Katie. 1975, what a year. I've said it before, I'll say it again. It's probably one of my favourite years in music. At the top of this year, in 2025, I did a 10 albums from 1975, 10 classic albums. I had such a great response and I had so many people going, what about this, what about this, what about this? And I promised I'd do a part 2. Not sure if I'll do a part 3. We'll see towards the end of the year, but this is the part 2, and this goes into some incredible albums that I didn't feature in that first video. I'll put a link below to that first video if you want to check them out. Hi everyone, I am popping in from the future here. I forgot to say it's my first year anniversary. So I wanted to just say thank you to everyone for supporting my channel. I have absolutely loved doing it, and may I do it for a lot longer. I really appreciate the vinyl community. I watch VC all the time, every week, learning so much about music, about my collection, and little hidden gems I have in my collection, and may I continue. So thanks very much. If you like this video, please like it and subscribe to my channel, and enjoy the 10 great albums from 1975. So this is 10 albums 50 years ago, 1975, and of course I'm kicking off with the absolute classic. Look at that. The Led Zeppelin Physical Graffiti with its clever die cut cover. Both sides came as a top down entry. This is my Australian original. And so if you, of course, everyone knows this album, but the sleeves obviously had these little windows of various famous people in them, and you could slot them in on the top and create a little fun effect. Apparently the production of this die cut album cover was so involved it actually delayed the album. So we all know this album. It's the 6th album from Led Zeppelin, Kashmir on it. So, like, absolutely brilliant tracks. I love this album, not as much as others, but absolutely brilliant. As I said, it's the Australian original album, and this was released on their is it their Vanity label? I don't know if you'd call it a Vanity label, but they created their own label and record label, and this was the first one on it, Swan Song Records, which went for less than a decade. So that is the first album. Right, the next one. I know you will all expect this to be on here. It wasn't included in my first list, and of course it's the absolute stunning Pink Floyd Wish You Were Here. Again, this is my Australian original copy. This was their 9th studio album. I just absolutely love this album. I prefer Pink Floyd to Led Zeppelin, I think. I mean, I do love the hard rock, the hard blues rock of Led Zeppelin, but I can listen to a whole album of Pink Floyd and just go back for more, whereas Led Zeppelin, I do get a bit fatigued. I do love them. They're probably almost equal, but Pink Floyd probably tips it. Obviously, this is the gatefold. Fantastic artwork. I love the kind of contemporary modern art on this album, and that looks like a hype sticker, but it's obviously not a hype sticker if you're familiar with it. And then the label is not dissimilar to that hype sticker. Again, Australian, or my original Australian album. And this album, for those that aren't familiar and you're new, you're new to record collecting, "Wish You Were Here" was the stunning concept album produced by Pink Floyd as a kind of a tribute to their original co-founder Syd Barrett, who had long since left the band. And folklore has it, or it is actually documented, that he did turn up to the sessions of this, and it was the last time they ever saw him. He suffered from a lot of mental illness. But it's such an exquisite album, and it's such a beautiful thing for rock musicians to do, is pay tribute to a past member. I just think it was so poetic. And the song "Wish You Were Here," the title track, is haunting. It's beautiful. My introduction to it actually came... I wasn't super aware of it until 2001, after September 11th, and the week following that tragedy, they had this musical concert or something that was broadcast, I think, around the world, and U2 came on and sang "Wish You Were Here," and I'd kind of was familiar with the track but had no kind of reference point for it. And I was blown away, and I just thought, what is that music? And that's where I kind of did my deep dive, and subsequently, obviously, am fully all in on Pink Floyd. But that was my true introduction. But that's not the only incredible music on this album. The song cycle almost that starts the album, it's like tracks 1 to 4, it's kind of like a song cycle. And then it ends with tracks 5 to 9. Shine on You, Crazy Diamond, part 1 through to part 5, and then it ends on side 2 with Shine on You, Crazy Diamond, part 4 to part 9. Absolutely quintessential Pink Floyd, and probably apart from The Wall and Dark Side of the Moon, it would be up there in their top 3 albums. Would be my opinion. Absolutely stunning album. 1975. Can you imagine living in this era? What a great era. I was, but I was a little child. All right, the next one. Again, this is my Australian original. Alice Cooper, his debut solo album after having left the Alice Cooper, or actually just temporarily parting the Alice Cooper group. 1975, Welcome to My Nightmare, another concept album around a boy called Stephen and his nightmares. Apparently, it's when you I haven't listened to this album for ages, and when you re-listen to this album and you kind of know the caricature history or the folklore around Alice Cooper, it's nowhere near as heavy as one's memory might suggest. I don't listen to it enough. And it's actually almost light rock. It's a funny little album. I'm not super sold on it, except for the song Only Women Bleed, about a woman in an abusive relationship. And that is just such a stunning song. Honestly, this album, for that song alone, is worth it. It's so beautiful. The song Stephen as well. It's quite haunting. Vincent Price, the kind of horror guy, lends his voice narrative to a track on this album, like a classic album. And the story goes around this album that he was Alice Cooper they were signed to a different label, and they had a clause in it that they were able to go to a different label only if they were doing a soundtrack. So they came up with a concept album so they could create this different album, so they could go to, I think it was Atlantic at the time. This is my Australian original. It was Anchor. Anchor was the sub-label. That's right. So, I mean, it's kind of a must-have for a rock collection. Another great 1975 album. Okay. Total pivot. Janice Ian, Between the Lines. Can you imagine living in this year? My goodness. and it doesn't matter what taste in music you have. And I'm assuming that most people who love the aforementioned albums are probably not a huge fan of Janice Ian. But this artist is absolutely stunning, and this album is a masterpiece. I love Janice Ian. Her vocal prowess is incredible, but her storytelling, and that's what this album was known for. And the song At 17, about the kind of coming of age and the angst of being at 17, absolutely stunning. I urge you to listen to this song again and just bask in its cleverness. She was only a teenager when she wrote these albums. She's still going. She's still performing. Her catalogue's incredible. She obviously started in the late 60s. This came out in 1975, and it was a huge, huge hit. Absolutely brilliant. I'll just read you a lyric that I just thought was stunning. And those of us with ravaged faces, lacking in the social graces, desperately remained at home, inventing lovers on the phone. Oh my goodness. So Janice Ian, 1975, releasing amazing art at the same time as Led Zeppelin and Pink Floyd. Again, my Australian original. Now we come to an Australian band called Skyhooks. Skyhooks were huge in Australia in 1975 and 74. This was Ego Is Not a Dirty Word. This was their second album, their second studio album. This is my original Australian release, gatefold album. I'll take the vinyl out. Released on Mushroom. Michael Gudinski's had a huge, huge hit with this album. You can see from the cover, they were very kind of glam rocky. They didn't really make it in America, and they were kind of people said they were just copycats, the poorer cousin of Kiss. They were trying to kind of copy Kiss, but they weren't. In Australia, they were absolutely their own thing, and masterful musicians, and absolutely huge. And Ego's Not a Dirty Word was a massive hit in Australia. We had a program called Countdown. It was helped along by that music program. But one of the other big hits on here was this really kind of lyrical country song called All My Friends Are Getting Married. Have us look that up and stream it. And if you think of Australian rock in the 70s and then you listen to All My Friends Are Getting Married, two totally different genres. It's a total country song. So up until their first album, Living in the 70s, was the biggest selling Australian album of all time. And then they released this next year, and it was huge. So that's Skyhooks. That gross finger on the back there. All My Friends Are Getting Married. Ego Is Not a Dirty Word. Very clever writing. Okay. 1975 also brought along this iconic Paul Simon album, Still Crazy After All These Years. This is my Australian CBS vinyl. Again, original on the orange CBS label. What hasn't been said about this album? It's so iconic. Obviously produced by Phil Ramone on Columbia. And actually featured, what song was it? Featured Art Garfunkel for the first time since 1970 as Simon and Garfunkel. And I think it was My Little Town. It was My Little Town. So the album opens with the famous song Still Crazy After All These Years. The beautiful kind of energetic gospel rock song, or gospel-like duet with Phoebe Snow, Gone at Last, and 50 Ways to Leave Your Lover, which is probably one of the most recognisable Paul Simon songs ever. All found on this incredible album, 1975. still crazy after all these years. One of the great albums of 1975. And you can really feel a change. You can really feel this. We're leaving the 60s behind. We're leaving Vietnam behind. Watergate's happened. It's all behind us. And getting into the mid-70s, music I feel started to change, both lyrically and from a musical sense. People were starting to experiment a lot more with what it meant to be a rocker, particularly in the UK and America at the time. And along comes this iconic album by Bruce Springsteen, Born to Run. This comes at a time when he's had 2 previous albums that haven't been commercial successes, and he's desperate to have a commercial success. Produced by John Landau and obviously engineered by Jimmy Iovine, and famously kind of around the same time also working with Patti Smith, and that's where Because the Night also came around about this time. So this album, absolute masterpiece, and a time in America when late teenagers were disillusioned with growing older, and it was a funny time. The working class teenager was kind of realizing the American dream maybe wasn't all that it cracked up to be, and Born to Run is kind of all about that. And Bruce Springsteen pens this incredible album with this iconic photo with Bruce leaning on the shoulder of Clarence Clemons, his famous saxophone bandmate. Who took that photo? Let me have a look. Did I write it down in my notes somewhere? Eric Miola. Oh, that's right. Eric Miola was a photographer for like Life magazine and was known for his vibrant, colourful photographs. And then he comes along and takes this beautiful photograph of Bruce Springsteen. So Born to Run, obviously with the classic song Born to Run. But of course, my favourite song on this album, and many people's favourite song on the album, is the opening track, Thunder Road. Oh, absolutely beautiful. I could listen to that non-stop all day, every day. That song is one of my favourite songs. So it was really considered a intersection, a pivotal piece of music, an album that was considered potentially the apex or the middle of the Venn diagram from the past 20 years of rock and roll music and what would come in the next 20 years. This was kind of the change and kind of forecasted what was to come. A beautiful, beautiful album. And so you can see we're working through some beautiful heavy rock and kind of the very end of prog rock, and then we're going into a little bit of female singer-songwriter with Janice Ian, and a little bit of that kind of folky Paul Simon and country rock of Bruce Springsteen. And then who should release this campfire concept album about a priest who has murdered his wife and her lover and is now on the run, but Willie Nelson in Redheaded Stranger. And it became so successful that he forever will be known as the Redheaded Stranger. This is a concept album through and through, about the aforementioned story. And this was a really interesting album that came about in 1975. Of course, Willie Nelson had been recording since the 60s, and this was like his 18th or 19th studio album. And he signed to a new label in, I think it was Columbia. And it was very well negotiated. He had creative freedom. And the moment he signed, he thought, I'm going to create this concept album. And they were just like, oh no, it's not going to work. This is going to be a disaster. And he stuck to his guns, and it became his biggest album of all time at that point. And he had his first #1 hit, Blue Eyes Crying in the Rain, which was actually released as a single before the album. And then they put it on the album. What an iconic album. It's so lo-fi. It's almost just him and his guitar. It feels like it's around the campfire and telling this story. And it actually takes a lot of intellectual kind of, leaning in, listening to kind of really fully appreciate it. But it's just such a great album. And it is kind of iconic in his catalogue. So it's one that you have to have. This one is actually from my Willie Nelson box set that Vinyl Me Please put out years ago. And thank God for Vinyl Me Please, and God, it's so sad that they're going under, or have gone under. But that box set, honestly, if you just want to really kind of best of Willie Nelson, it is such a great box set, and they're beautifully produced jackets, really, really thick card, and just beautifully produced. So I was very happy to get that at the time. Right, I've got 2 more. I'm ending with an absolute banger, so stay tuned. The penultimate album I'm going to talk about from 1975 was this one I only discovered last year, or beginning of this year or last year. And I think I've spoken about it before, but this was a revelation to me. I knew Fairport Convention, and I'd heard of Richard and Linda Thompson, but I'd never really got into them until this album, Pour Down Like Silver. And released in 1975, they had taken up the Sufi faith, I think it was, and they were living in a commune in London, and there were certain kind of, I guess, unspoken rules around the type of music they could create, and they created an album based on their influences from that religion. It is beautiful, and I am all in on Richard and Linda Thompson. I love this album so much. It's had been on fairly high rotation since I bought this. This was just a kind of a on sale. I got it for like $12.99 from JB Hi-Fi, which is kind of like your Walmart or something. I don't know what it's like in America, but it was on 180 gram vinyl. It just sounds fantastic. And I got it like so cheaply. Really heavy stock. Obviously it was released on Ireland at the time. And very, very happy to have that. 1975, what a rich, rich year for diverse music. And then finally, iconic, and I have to end on an Australian album. Of course you will all know what it is, but one of the greatest rock albums, AC/DC TNT, only released in Australia and New Zealand. It was the second album from AC/DC, second to their High Voltage from the year before. And of course, after this album, they released High Voltage in international regions, which included a lot of these songs. Obviously, opening track, It's a Long Way to the Top. If you want to rock and roll, and for every Australian kid at that time, etched in our brain, It's a Long Way to the Shop if you want a sausage roll. That was just such a funny primary school thing that we all sang at the time. Oh God, TNT. I mean, there's just the Jack. God, such a classic album. This is my OG Australian on Albert Productions. There's the label. And, you know, what a fantastic way to end my part 2 of 10 great albums from 1975, 50 years ago. If you liked this video, I'd love you to subscribe and maybe like it. Please put in the comments below if I've missed any. First, have a look at my previous one. Check out what I did there. I've now done 20. Are there still ones that you think I should include? I know I haven't included Bob Dylan. Don't come at me. It might happen in my third part. I'll see you in my next video. Bye.